Welcome to Emotional CPR, Assisting Others Through Emotional Crisis. I'm Leah Harris, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar. Here's the outline for today's presentation. First, we'll start out with an introduction to emotional CPR, followed by comparing eCPR to the traditional clinical approach. We'll review the elements of dialogue. We will take each of the eCPR proficiencies and discuss them, followed by a short video demonstration of eCPR and an open question discussion period. This training conference will be recorded. The PowerPoint presentation and audio recording of the webinar will be posted to the eCPR website within a few days of today's webinar. This webinar presentation will last for approximately an hour with at least 30 minutes, followed by 30 minutes of question and answer and discussion. If you have any questions, you may ask them anytime through the question function in your control panel. You may also use the hand raise function if you wish to ask a question verbally. Questions will be taken in the order that they are received. And now I will turn it over to our speakers to introduce themselves.
Hi,
Sam?
my name is, yes, hi. My name's Sam Ahrens, and I work for a grassroots empowerment project in Wisconsin. We work to empower people's mental health recovery through education and advocacy. And I am involved in eCPR because it reconnects us with our innate capacity to help and care for each other, and I believe that's transformational.
Dan?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Daniel Fisher, and I'm Executive Director of the National Empowerment Center and on the board of the National Coalition for Mental Health Recovery. And I find emotional CPR very empowering for me and for the people that I work with.
Ann?
Hi, good morning for those of us on the western side of the world. I'm Ann Ryder. I'm the Executive Director of a peer-run program in Arizona called Recovery Empowerment Network. We hold a statewide consumer network grant, and we also provide a wide variety of individualized peer-run services developed from my own history of psychiatric challenges and the experience of our staff and members.
And I'm Lauren Spiro, the Director of the National Coalition for Mental Health Recovery. My vision is that people will use emotional CPR along with their own inherent wisdom to give and receive emotional support, thus, in many instances, avoiding unnecessary, costly, and coercive interventions. So we're delighted to share eCPR with you today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the birth of eCPR. It came about with a small group of people who understood that emotional crisis is a universal human experience, and that can happen to anyone, really, at any time. And this group of people envisioned a world where everyone had knowledge and skills to assist someone through an emotional crisis. And people could provide this emotional support, and people could receive this emotional support without risk of punishment, ridicule, shame, embarrassment, coercion, or judgment. And this group of people were concerned that the direction that mental health services were moving in the United States was inconsistent with our vision. So imagine if you yourself were experiencing an emotional crisis. And imagine if someone was there for you, supporting you to move through the crisis. So what is eCPR? Basically, it's a public health education program which prepares really anyone that can listen to assist someone through an emotional crisis. And so we realized when we were, the birthing of eCPR, we realized that there was really a vast and compelling need for people, for the general public, to learn how to assist someone, through an emotional crisis. And we looked a bit to cardiopulmonary resuscitation as a bit of a model for us. CPR has saved thousands of lives by teaching lay people to assist someone through a cardiac crisis. So eCPR is really a form of heart-to-heart connection for emotional resuscitation. And I'm just going to really quickly go through the three components of eCPR because you're going to be hearing more about each component, the C, the P, and the R in just a few minutes. So the C is about connecting. The P is about empowering. And then the R is about revitalizing. So that's really helping people to reestablish roles and routines and relationships so they can get back into the rhythm of life in the community. So Dan is going to talk about the origins of eCPR.
Yeah, hello. The major origin for me, first of all, was really from my own experience of recovery and the lived experience of other people that I know. When I was in my most severe emotional state, I wanted someone to be with me who really could communicate that I would get through it and give me hope, and really would be very human, very personable. And it's been hard to get that from ordinary professional training. So that's the first origin is our lived experience. And the second is what we've learned about recovery. And SAMHSA has a new definition of recovery, and it's based on 10 different components that we've come up with. Probably for emotional CPR, one of the most important is the mutual respect and the sense that the person has the capacity, as Lauren was saying, to get through the experience and connecting on a very personal level. The third really was when I went to down to Louisiana after the hurricanes Katrina and Rita, and what I learned there was that crisis counseling is very different from ordinary therapy. There isn't a labeling that goes on or analyzing that goes on. You meet the person where they are, and you meet them with their needs. And actually psychological first aid was developed after disasters as well. Next slide shows that this is also based on trauma-informed care because we're more concerned with what happened to people than what's wrong with you. And again, feeling that inside there's a healthy core that each person has, and that we're bringing out that healthy core rather than trying to cover it over or just reduce symptoms. The fifth one is around suicide prevention, and probably most important for suicide prevention is being able to communicate hope. So we really try to communicate a hopeful attitude, and people see that there are new possibilities that their life can go towards. And lastly, it's based on cultural attunement or cultural competency, which really is to enter into the person's own world. And we talk about dialogue a little later. You'll see that the idea of pushing your own preconceptions aside and letting the person really set the agenda, let the person that you're with really define what their reality is extremely important for cultural attunement and for emotional CPR. So the Lauren is going to now compare emotional CPR approach with a traditional clinical approach.
Thank you, Dan. So there's a table for those of you on the we have the webinar, the slides in front of you, and I'm going to go through this. There's a number of dimensions on the left side of the screen. So we start with the issue of showing emotions. So in eCPR, emotional expression is encouraged. And that's for the person in crisis, and as well as the person who is doing the supporting. So in other words, I might shed some tears as a supporter, you know, and that's okay as long as we're focused on supporting the person in crisis. When we allow ourselves to show that we're touched by the other person, that we really care, it deepens the connection and positively impacts the interaction. So if we compare that to the traditional clinical approach, which is one of really maintaining objectivity and attempting to suppress feelings. Moving on to the uses of power, in eCPR, we very much approach this and believe in a power with approach. So this is two people, two intelligent people with equal power, and we can figure this out together. As opposed to the traditional or clinical approach, which is very much based on a more hierarchical model, a power over model that's very much about, I'm going to fix you. In terms of sharing lived experience, in eCPR, we do share our own experience through crisis or emotional turmoil as a means of connecting and empowering the other person. As opposed to the traditional approach, which really teaches us to keep the experience to ourselves, to not share this. And I will say that I was trained as a traditional provider and worked in a traditional system for 25 years. In terms of our belief, the eCPR approach very much believes that every human being is a whole person, and that, again, using the power with approach, that we're equals. Our mind hasn't gone anywhere, and that together we can figure this out. As opposed to the clinical approach, which is very much that, this person is broken. They can't figure out what to do without professional help. In terms of the use of labels and languaging in eCPR, we really try to avoid that and compare that to the traditional approach, where it's highly recommended and typically used. In terms of training, really any human being that can listen can do emotional CPR and can be certified in emotional CPR. There's no particular training you need beforehand. And compared to the traditional approach, of course, there's a very prescriptive, professional training that's required. And last but not least is the issue of accessibility. We've worked very hard to make eCPR culturally attuned and in very accessible, understandable language. We have a very diverse advisory board that helps us to do that. And compared to the traditional approach, it's very ethnocentric, or they rely heavily on very professional terms that many lay people probably have trouble understanding. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ann Ryder, who will talk with us about communication skills.
Thank you, Lauren. Dialogue skills are important in eCPR because they create a different dynamic. And can we have the next slide? Thanks. Ordinary communication is often more like a debate or a contest in which one person wins and the other loses. This isn't really helpful when someone's experiencing emotional distress. Instead, when we use dialogue techniques, we're able to share power with the other person. Balancing power is quite different than the traditional style of behavioral health services. When we experience emotional intensity, it can be terrifying to be confronted by someone who wishes to take power, either by telling us what to do or by forcing us into a situation we might resist. eCPR works with the person, sharing power with them. And while dialogue is most often found in group practice, we can use our dialogue skills as tools to develop the connection with another. We're going to briefly review 5 simple elements of dialogue that are used in eCPR. Next slide. Dialogue is an exercise in authenticity. Instead of the traditional approach to crisis in which we listen to the person and make plans silently, essentially behind their back, we share our thoughts and feelings so we can resolve the problem together. Think about a time when you were frightened or overwhelmed. Did it help to have someone tell you what you should do? I personally find it more frightening when I think someone's going to decide what should happen to me without even talking to me about it. Authenticity is crucial in eCPR, as it's difficult to make a connection with someone when we're not authentic. It can take some practice to find our authentic voice. Take a deep breath. There isn't any hurry. Notice your own feelings and use them to connect with the other person. Tell the truth. It's okay if you're afraid. This is the most authentic part of us, and that honesty and authenticity will resonate with the other person. Next slide. Most of us will have some preconceived ideas about how to respond to a crisis. eCPR asks that we approach differently. Dialogue skills provide the foundation of listening together as a different kind of conversation. In dialogue, instead of choosing one correct position, we find a larger understanding that includes all perspectives. Stop thinking about what you're going to say back and just listen completely and fully. Suspend what you think you know about the situation and open to the other person's experience. Slow down. Set aside your own ideas about what is real or true or necessary and listen for the other person's truth. Lead with genuine curiosity. What's the other person not saying? What might be behind the words? What do the words mean? What might I be missing? Often the most important point is not said aloud. Next slide. Everyone wants to be treated with respect, especially when we're experiencing distress. Respecting a person in crisis begins with recognizing the person as a whole human being. Try to see the whole person who's acting in a way that might not make sense to you, but probably makes sense in the context of the moment. People in distress aren't broken, even when they're acting in extreme ways. If we can continue to demonstrate respect and engage the person in a partnership, the person will respond. This leads to connection. Remembering that each person is the expert in his or her own life, treating people with respect allows them to be the expert. Remembering that dialogue skills share power, we respect the person's innate wisdom and expertise, and we recognize that the person in crisis has something to teach us, especially about finding a solution to the current challenges. Next slide, please. Remember that respect has many meanings.
A little louder.
Okay. Remember that respect has many meanings. Even if we speak the same language, and even if we come from the same culture and tradition, our ideas about respect may be very different. We like to say we treat others as we would like to be treated ourselves, but in reality, often others want to be treated differently than we would. Difference is not illness or wrong or evil or crazy. It's just different. Dialogue skills help us offer respect without an expectation that it will be received as respect. An intent to treat with respect followed by a willingness to be wrong is enough. Finding our way to respect with people who appear to be very different from us can be difficult. I tend to lead with my feelings, which are relatively universal. Humans may not share culture, traditions, or behavior, but we do share basic emotions, and we can make a connection based on mutual feelings if we're willing to share our own difference. Curiosity can lead us to understanding, where judgment would close a door. Next slide, please. One key difference between dialogue and other kinds... I'm right on top of the phone. It's about as loud as it gets. One key difference between dialogue and other kinds of conversation is that we don't have to be right. Every perspective is valid. This dialogue tool is crucial in eCPR because it avoids imposing our own thoughts and beliefs on others as true with a capital T. Trying to enforce my ideas about what should be done will probably just make you defensive, and then I can't make a connection. It's okay to have our own thoughts and feelings, and we certainly will. It's also okay to share our thoughts and feelings because that's authentic. We don't, however, have to share our ideas as the only true way. When I tell you what's true for me, it's only true for me, and I want to know what's true for you. In dialogue, it's all right, it's all true, it's all okay. Next slide. Dialogue is uniquely person-to-person, with each person being an equal. When we relinquish our power over others, we allow ourselves to hear the other fully, especially to hear the emotional context of the situation. This is the voice of the heart, where true connection is made. We might say that dialogue is heart-to-heart instead of head-to-head. The heart connection is more important than logic. Emotions aren't rational, and emotional crises aren't resolved with a logical mind. Feelings aren't good or bad, they just are. This is true for us as well as for the person in distress. We might be afraid. We might feel overwhelmed too. When we make the decision to support another person using eCPR, we dive into a human experience which we then share with another. This is a special and sacred journey not to be taken lightly. Now, using an authentic voice, a new listening skill, respect for the person as a whole human being, suspension of belief in our own correctness, and a willingness to engage the other person directly at the level of the heart, we're ready to practice eCPR. Next slide. And I'd like Dan Fisher to describe this lovely diagram of two people in dialogue.
Thank you, Ann. This actually is an adaptation of a diagram drawn by late Tom Anderson, who was a practitioner of dialogue from Norway and a dear friend. What it illustrates in blue is ordinary conversation. The person on the left, A, speaks. It's listened to by person B, who then speaks back. That's on the cognitive verbal level. In true dialogue, we try to encourage in an emotional CPR that the person communicating on the left is also communicating their feelings. As Lauren said, showing your feelings, showing tears at times, showing maybe frustration, showing happiness on the part of the person who is assisting is vital, because that shows that you're authentic, that shows you're real, that shows you're there. And that's so encouraging to the person who's going through emotional distress, who then on the right sees and feels and senses through your body tone, through your gestures, through your tone of voice, through your facial expression. Are you really there? Are you really here for me? And then feels that and senses that in one's own heart. And that really begins the emotional dialogue that often is vital in sort of kickstarting someone's enthusiasm and their vitality, which we'll get to later. And now, on the next slide, we'll have Sam, who will start to describe really what it means to be prepared for emotional CPR.
Thanks, Dan. So how do we prepare? Unless we're someone who does crisis-based work, we can't predict when we're going to meet someone who needs our help. So in general, what we look at is how caring for ourselves actually relates to caring for others. What's that equation for us? What is it that nurtures and replenishes us to the extent that we are able to extend ourselves to others? So we explore that. We explore what we can do to help ourselves stay calm and centered in the midst of crisis, whether that's our own distress or working with someone else. And we find our own ways to connect with our intention to open our mind and heart. And the answers are very individual. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Hello? Okay, thank you. Ann and Dan both talked about being authentic, being genuine, and I'd like to talk about why it's so important in terms of connecting. So a woman in my in eCPR training I was involved in talked about how in crisis especially we need people who are in what she described as being in full possession of their humanity. And I think that's a good definition of being genuine. I experience people as being genuine when first and foremost, no matter what the situation, they relate to me as a human being. There can be roles that we're both expected to play and rules that get in the way and all kinds of obstacles. So a way of thinking about what we call masks is that it's what prevents us from connecting in that way simply as human beings. So in my experience, when despite all these challenges, we reach out to another person with an open heart and mind, it is a very powerful way of saying, you're not alone, we're in this together. And that in itself can begin to transform a crisis into an opportunity. Next slide. Thank you. Connecting is the first step, and it often takes the most time. A person might be angry, they may be tearful, or they may be shut down and numb. So with great respect and sensitivity, we are meeting them where they are, listening with our heart, and beginning to communicate. So I'm going to talk about connecting in terms of separate skills, and then also try to give a sense of how it feels, which is a natural, flowing, whole process. So when I've been in crisis, I've encountered people who truly seem to believe that I was hopeless, and also people who really seemed to believe in me and believe that I could change. In the midst of emotional crisis, both of those attitudes were equally convincing to me. So our belief in a person's ability can really rekindle or ignite their hope that they can navigate this crisis. My own willingness to step out of my comfort zone was really inspired by other people who had that kind of faith in me before I did in myself. They were brave and kind enough to stick with me in the midst of very strong emotional distress when it really wasn't clear to me or to them what would help. But what was clear to me was that they weren't afraid of the strong emotions that I was feeling, and that led me to think that maybe I didn't have to be either. So in connecting, we see that when people are allowed to express the strong feelings they have and they feel heard and supported, they move out of those strong emotions on their own, in their own time, in their own way. We can doubt this and we can lose sight of this, but think of when you're very upset and someone says, calm down. If you're like me, that really never has the intended effect. It has the opposite effect. Instead, when I really feel heard, I very quickly start to regroup and move forward on my own. Next slide. Thank you. So when we stay open and curious, the ways in which we connect are really unique and unexpected. I had an experience once with a woman who was experiencing really strong feelings of despair and loss and isolation. And we made a connection that had to do with watching Sesame Street. That was totally unexpected. Neither of us could have foreseen that. And it was being open that allowed us both to discover that connection together. At the same time that we want to be open, we want to be centered in ourselves. When I first began working with people who were homeless, there were times when the situations were so difficult and the emotions so intense that I could just lose my sense of self and my sense of being grounded. In other words, I got overwhelmed with a person's distress. But as I discovered how it felt to maintain that balance of being grounded and open, I saw that it not only feels a lot better, it works better in terms of my ability to be more fully present and to really listen and hear. It's a lot like that picture that Dan explained of heart-to-heart dialogue. There's a feedback loop. There's a flow of one heart speaking to another. And I once heard this described as listening someone into their own wisdom, and that I connected with that. That's been my experience when people listen to me that deeply, when they're fully and compassionately present. People can access their own wisdom and begin to see possibilities. We can go on now. Next slide, please. Um, so what creates emotional safety and what communicates caring, as well as what the unique barriers and opportunities are? They're so individual. They are so personal. So we really enter into each encounter with a person with a lot of respect, with a lot of genuineness, and really an appreciation for how unique and precious each person is. So we need to learn, we want to learn what safety and care mean to them. And we let them tell us in their own way and at their own pace. We let them lead the way. I'm going to turn this over to Lauren, but before I do, I just want to say in terms of these separate skills that experientially connecting has a flow of genuine communication, and both people are able to identify it when it happens. Often when connecting happens, both people take a deep breath and release it at the same time, and often it's the time when there's eye contact for the first time. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to talk about empowerment.
Thank you, Sam. Empowerment means inviting the person to remember that they have power and that they have the ability to exercise that power in their own lives. As we begin to feel a connection with the person in crisis, we can recognize that some things we are doing are supporting the person to move in a positive, hopeful, or helpful direction. And we continue to notice what the person is responding to in order to better engage him or her. We observe, for example, verbal and nonverbal communication, their body language, their posture, their tone of voice, as Dan mentioned earlier. And we begin or continue to offer empowering elements into the interaction as the person moves into a deeper level of awareness. So as the individual in emotional crisis begins to feel safe and is able to communicate, it's important that they begin to experience their capacity to return to life in the community. So they may not be ready yet as we begin to move into empowerment, but we're hopefully moving in that direction. We are more capable and resourceful than we may feel, and that realization enables people to shift from distress to power and passion. So it's important to be aware that sometimes we want to use the same language or the same words that the person has used to describe her experience. So for example, if someone's talking about feeling really angry or maybe even enraged, I might comment on how sometimes my anger is an expression of my passion or my desire for wanting things to be different than they are now. I try to channel the anger or the passion into making a change that I feel good about. So there's a dynamic here that I'm modeling as we're in this empowering phase of eCPR, and that is in sharing myself or my experience with the person. I'm trying to shift from my being helpful to my inviting them to feel empowered. And, when I'm really connected with them, which I think Sam did a wonderful job of explaining, that connection, it's very humbling. And I think Sam said, it's a sacred experience, and I agree. So I'm using my wisdom from the School of Hard Knocks, to mirror back the best that I'm seeing in this person. So it's not, I'm going to help you. It's really, I'm walking through the fire with you. We want the person to know that they're not alone, and that's the connecting piece. And we want them to know that they're the expert in their own lives, and that's the empowering piece. So the more we share of ourselves in an authentic way, and when I say authentic, I mean power with, not power over. The more we walk together through towards the revitalizing phase. So some empowering proficiencies are on this slide. There's more on the PowerPoint on the eCPR website if you want the full list of the proficiencies. So the first one here is about demonstrating, that we can be in a power with as opposed to power over relationship. And so one way of expressing that might be sharing an observation about what we've noticed about the person's ability to show their power, with us. So I might say something like, I think it's courageous for you to even be talking to me now, or to be thinking about how to make your situation better. Facilitating the other person's access to his or her inner wisdom and tapping into their courage and power. Oh, let's talk about a sacred experience. So one way that I might do that is just to use validating statements about the person, like you're thinking well. And of course, this needs to be genuine, so I'm not going to say that if I don't think the person's thinking well, but I want to find something, some validating things to share with this person that I'm working with there. We want to sensitively reframe crisis as opportunity, and sometimes, it's really hard to see that this crisis is an opportunity. So I think we want to be careful about how we share that. But if we can communicate that in this unique relationship that we're in, I think it is important that many of us have learned, although often we don't learn when we're in the midst of the crisis, but we do learn soon afterwards that it really is an opportunity to think about what we want our life to look about, what we want our life to be about, to look like, our deeper values and priorities. So no matter how much we may want to plan for someone else, it's important to remember that we are there not to make a plan for them, but to support them in making their own plan. So when someone is able to formulate concrete next steps that they can take, no matter how small, it reinforces their ability to think well and to regain a sense of power or control, which in turn helps them move out of emotional crisis. So Dan is going to talk about the R, or revitalizing.
Thank you, Lauren. The problem of distress, emotional distress, often leaves a person feeling out of touch, as Sam had said at the beginning, out of touch with our own vital center, our own source of life inside. And the job of someone helping another person through this sort of crisis is to create a space which invites life in, a space which allows the person to feel that they have possibilities, to feel once again that they can look outside of themselves. And there is this sense that when you're in a crisis, you curl up into sort of a emotional or physical, even fetal position. So you want to help the person as they sense their power, as they sense their possibilities, to be able to reestablish the connections around them, because you're really acting as a bridge. You're not going to be there for them indefinitely. You want to check in with them. Who's important in their life? What do they like to do? What are their what makes them happy? One example was reaching out in a role play, as this woman started asking this man who was in the distress role, "What's your favorite music? What interests you? What gets your juices flowing?" And because ultimately you want the person to feel that they can initiate their own life, and they can find what's purposeful and what's meaningful to them. The next slide goes over some of the central elements of revitalizing. Even the word revitalizing, vitality, life, to bring life back. A lot of that is through finding meaning. What is really meaningful for a person, so that they can think, maybe there's somebody who's important to them that they might call, or maybe there's a pet they need to take care of. I know for myself, I was in great desperation, and I thought, oh, I have to take care of my cat, and who will take care of my cat? And just even feeding a plant or an animal or something else that's alive brings you life. It's important also to think, well, what are your dreams? Maybe not your dreams for years ahead, but what what do you dream about that's important to you? What do you want to think about in the future? Because you want to expand the person's sense of time. In a crisis, you're feeling very small in time. You're feeling that everything is right now and that's it, and there's hardly any future. Well, how about tomorrow? How about the next day? Is there anything that might interest you? Is there a play you'd like to go to, a movie? And if you know of one, maybe even bring it up to somebody, something you've seen that was enjoyable. And but especially comes back to relationships. You know, who is in your life that's important, and how can you contact them? Maybe even just a letter, maybe a phone call, something that you can reach out for. We now have a role play that was done actually out in California, and so if you'll see in this role play, and maybe you can see a little bit the different phases of connecting, empowering, and revitalizing, and then we'll discuss it a little bit after everybody watches it.
And we apologize that the screen is somewhat small. We were told by GoToWebinar that the larger we make it, there'll be some audio difficulties, so please bear with us. Hopefully you can hear. This is a little bit of an experiment in showing video, so thank you for your patience.
Tracy. Oh my gosh, what is it? I can't take this. This thing started up all over again. And I'm trapped in this, and I can't get out of this. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do. Tell me. I don't know. I don't even know. No, I gotta breathe. I gotta breathe. Okay. Oh, this still helped a little bit. I think he's just yelling, and he's screaming at me and calling me names, and I don't like that, and I don't want to be there, and I don't know how to get out. I don't know how to get out. I don't know what to do. You're out. You're out right now. I'm out the house. Yeah, I know. But it's still there, and I don't want to go back. But I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. What do we do? I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I know you can't do that for me. You can't do that for me. I have to figure this out, but I don't know how to do that. But I can be with you. I can be with you. I'm here. I'm listening. Take your time. It's okay. Okay. It's okay. Okay. I'm so glad not to be washing the car. Take your time. Take your time. No. I'm so glad that I'm not washing the car. Okay. I'm glad that I'm with you. Tell me. Just share with me. Okay. This is not a good situation that I'm in, and I know this, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out. I mean, I want to go. I do. I'm going to just get my things and go, but I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to, and it just seems like I'm stuck. Like I'm stuck. Yeah, I'm really feeling that. Yeah. But if we listen, if you share with me, I'm sure you can get unstuck. You think? Oh. I've been stuck a lot. Yeah. And, I'm ready. I'm ready to help. Well, I'm not living with him, but I'm ready to share with you. I'm ready to be with you. I'm ready to listen. Okay? Oh, yes. Yes, whatever you need. Okay. Whatever you need. right now I just need a place to be outside of this, you know, to figure out where and what to do. Right now it's just a lot, but I think if I find a way to get away, I think I can start to think.
I certainly trust you to find that way. You know, there are all kinds of resources. If you want me to be with you in trying to find these resources.
You know, if I wanted to go, I mean, I don't want to, you know, put anything on you, but what if I wanted to go? Would you take me?
I'll take it.
You take me?
Of course. You ask me, I do. You know, okay, well, whenever. Just ask me. I'm here for you. I'm your neighbor. I'm your friend.
Really?
Yes. I've always been your friend. I've always been. So, no, whatever. Okay. We do.
We do. All right. I know I interrupted you washing your car.
I'm so glad.
Okay. Is it okay if I just go and just sit for a minute and then maybe?
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah. Whatever you want. Let's go. Let's sit.
All right. Thank you.
Minute, 2, 5 hours. Whatever. Whatever you need. Right now.
Right now, I can
That's what you need.
that.
And if that will help you, I'm ready to see you feel better. I'm already starting to see you breathe better. I'm starting to see you feel better.
No, I wasn't pretty. I felt it. Thanks for telling me.
I felt it.
Okay. Thanks.
I stopped breathing. I mean, it was like the air was being sucked out of both of us. I'm so glad I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm glad I saw you. Let's go. Let's go.
I will comment. I was struck by the progression, especially when the woman in distress shifted and seemed to breathe easier and started to notice that he had been washing his car and said that she was sorry that she had interrupted him. I think that was really the start of the revitalizing part, and the breathing together was very. I think when she started to breathe easier, that was really around feeling her power a bit more. But a lot of it is, I would say, probably 2/3 was around connecting, which is not unusual. Lauren, what did you think?
Well, I was particularly looking at the empowering piece of it, and so I have 2 comments about that. One, I thought it was an exquisite example of empowering when the neighbor said, "I'm sure you can get unstuck," and then he said, "I get stuck a lot." So I think that's a good example of empowering. And another example that struck me was, and it's really, I think, both connecting and empowering, was just, I think, 100% of his attention was focused on her, and I think that was so obvious and so clear. And when we get and when we receive that kind of attention, I think when we receive it in particular, it's a very powerful contradiction to the isolation that many of us feel, and that we particularly feel when we're in crisis. So I just thought that was absolutely exquisite. Anyone else?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about connection. It's not as clear in the way the video played here, but when I've seen it before, and he comes up and he is very present, but he's also kind of moving back and forth, I think, in terms of extending himself but giving herself some space, and I think he really conveys absolute empathy and caring and a willingness to be present with her really strong emotions. He's not afraid. He's not going, whoa, you know, and when he said, are you breathing? It was like that to me was one of the first strongest moments of connections, because she put her hand to her heart and she was like, and then she did take a breath, and so I think it was the nonverbal communication and his response to it, and then was the start of it, and then that talking about are you breathing was another real moment of connection.
Yeah, what you're saying, Sam, also points out that these, although we've designed them as C and P and R, they don't follow just in a linear sequence. There's a little bit of connecting, a little bit of empowering, a little bit of revitalizing, then it goes to a deeper connecting. It's a little bit more like a reiterative spiral of deepening, connecting, deepening, empowering.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because she said, she went, that helps, and then she sort of went a little deeper, and he followed her along. Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, we're thrilled to have plenty of time left for our question and answer and discussion session. Just to reiterate, some of you have already started asking some fantastic questions we have coming in. You can ask via your question function on your control panel, or you can do the hand raise. And we will endeavor to at least have a few folks ask a question verbally. So, you know, please feel free to do the hand raise if you would like to do that. So the first question I want to read is, there have been a couple questions that have come in about this, about the issue of, you know, where a person is at with their crisis. One person said, you know, am I correct in assuming that this program is not meant for people in psychosis or having delusions, like when somebody is, you know, paranoid, thinks that they're Jesus Christ, etc. And there was a related question about what do you do if the person can't make a decision on their own, sort of what to do about their situation. So I think there's questions about kind of different experiences of reality and how you would apply eCPR to that situation. So Anne, did you want to start off addressing that and see if any other speakers have some thoughts?
I can go ahead and start with that one. I wouldn't make the assumption that a person who's in an altered state of reality would not be responsive to eCPR. Having worked with a lot of people who are in a different kind of reality than the one that I share with them, my experience has been that people are eminently reachable, and especially when I make an attempt to be authentic with them and to understand their perspective and not to say that that's not real, because it's genuinely real for that person. So if I try to get into an understanding of their space, I think it's much easier to make a connection and to help people begin to distinguish between a shared reality and a private reality, which I think is kind of the basis of where people start to get back into the world. In terms of people not understanding, they're reaching out for advice, they don't feel like the expert in their own life. Frankly, that sounds like me and my best friend, because she always asks for my advice, and I don't know the right answer for her, but I do know how to ask the right kinds of questions to help her sort through her own ideas and to help her slow down long enough to access her own inner wisdom.
Great. Did anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would like to, one, I really agree with Anne with what you said about reaching people in whatever state and not labeling those states, but also in terms of them making a decision. You know, the time frame is really up to the person, so it might be what they, you know, the decision of what to do right then, or what to do that day and that when they get home. So, you know, it's not problem solving, it's staying with people and empowering and believing that they can find their next step.
Yeah. Am I on?
Did you want to respond to that one or to another question?
Well, to this next
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Oh, before we go to the next one, I wanted to just add
Sure, Lauren.
a little something to that, because I think these questions are really excellent, and I'm remembering when I was 16 and I was very stuck in monologue, and I really, and that ended up me being institutionalized and labeled with chronic schizophrenia. And I just think if someone had kind of stood in my shoes, if someone had really reached for me and trusted that my mind was okay and engaged me in dialogue, it would have led to a whole different outcome. And I today, you know, 30-some years later, I truly believe that I would not have ever needed to be hospitalized if back then, it's a long time ago, people really understood how to trust my mind and engage with me.
Yeah, I'd like, this is Dan, I'd like to add to that and also build on another related question, which was to what extent do you reveal your own past, making yourself vulnerable? And I see those very related, because when I was in another reality or in monologue, as they say in Finland, I really, more than anything, yearned for authentic human being. And I would be able to come out briefly if someone was very human and was able to reveal something of themselves. So this teaching of being impersonal, I think, actually interferes with what you need most at a time like that. And I think it's very empowering. When you're with somebody and they say they've been through something similar and they got through it, that's what I wanted to hear more than anything. And not only just hear it, but to see that they felt it and that they could express some of the feeling of it. Because then that gives you confidence, it gives you courage to go on.
Well, and that they believe that you will kind of come out of it, believe in you, exactly.
Yeah. When you don't believe in yourself, because you lose belief in yourself at those times. You need someone, you need to borrow that belief, yeah.
All right, anyone else want to address that issue of revealing your past and boundaries?
No, I think we've said it.
Okay.
Maybe
All right,
we
great.
can go on.
Sure. There are a set of questions about comparing the eCPR approach with another program, which is mental health first aid, and some people kind of wanted to understand some of the differences between those two approaches.
Well, I might say a word about it. First of all, I think they are complementary, but mental health first aid was developed really before recovery had taken hold in Australia, for instance, and before peer support was really emphasized as much. So this emotional CPR is really grounded in our lived experience by 20 consumer survivor leaders here in this country, what we most wanted. I also compared a little bit to CPR. If you had a cardiac condition, if your heart stopped, the very first thing you want is how can someone restart that heart? And that's really what emotional CPR is. When somebody's emotional heart seems to be breaking or seems to have stopped, how can you restart their emotional heart? As I understand mental health first aid and reading through it, it's a little bit more oriented towards identifying, what type of diagnostic problem someone might have and referring them on to a professional, which may have its place after perhaps somebody has been through their acute emotional issue. But we try to do without labeling and really just help the person through the issue first. Any other?
Well, we often get that question, and actually that's one reason we created the table, which we shared with you today, comparing the eCPR and the traditional approach. And I think, like Dan said, they're complementary. And I think it's many people have actually been through both trainings. And so if that's an option, I think that's a great idea.
All right. We have actually several questions from people wanting to know how does one get certified in eCPR? How does the training process work? And people are wanting to know a little bit more about that.
Well, basically, just write us or call us, however you want to get in touch with us. We're negotiating many certifications currently. Generally, they're 2 days, but we are flexible to meet your needs. We've been in negotiations with law enforcement, for example, and they can't give a whole day. So we've designed a program where they get it in 2-hour segments. So we're happy to work with you, but generally for the general public, not law enforcement, for example, it is a 2-day training for the certification, and then we also have a trained facilitators training, which is 4 days. So please let us know. And I think the last slide has our contact information. And we're happy to get back to
I might add, sorry.
I was just going to say that we try to keep the website updated with upcoming training, so you can check the eCPR website. Go ahead, Sam.
I just wanted to say that the training itself proceeds mostly by ways of role plays, and so we talk about the different proficiencies, and we basically practice those role plays like the one we saw in the video, and so it's very, very experiential and pretty amazing.
Another question?
All right.
Read one out.
Yeah, I think there are people that are really wanting to understand more about how to work with people who are going through some kind of alternate reality. And I know we sort of dealt with that a little bit, but someone was saying, can you be more specific on how to dialogue with someone who is paranoid or delusional? Are you supposed to validate the delusions as reality since they are the person's reality?
I would say one thing, this is Sam, I would say that, you're really looking to connect with their feeling and offer support for the state that they're in. So that's really the focus. I think the issue of validating their reality, I think I don't think you have to go there. I think you're really trying to communicate with them on a state of what their feeling is and what would be supportive to them in transitioning, in finding their way to out of the feeling of distress.
Yeah, I would second that. I usually, what I most wanted and what I find people most want is to identify the feeling with the feeling. If somebody is talking about very unusual thoughts that probably are hard to verify about CIA or whatever, you say, you must be scared. That must be scary. And I went through such a scary period too. Instead of getting into is it happening or not happening, because it's the feeling that's the most real. That's what really grips you. And then when you're with somebody who shares that feeling, it's like, oh, you felt fear too, and then that helps you connect with another human being that overcomes that sense of isolation.
So I feel like I want to share something that I don't share very often, actually, but it just came to mind. So I was 17 when I got out of a mental institution, and a few years later I was actually working in a mental institution. And there was one particular shift where I hadn't been on this unit before, and there was a man, maybe 30 years old or so. He was in a seclusion room, but the door was open. And the staff took turns, male staff, I was the only female on the unit that evening. They took turns sitting on like a bar stool outside his door. And that went on for hours, and I thought, let me try something. I was feeling a little courageous. And so I, to the surprise of the two guys that were on the shift with me, I decided to sit on the floor, basically at the threshold of the door, okay? And he had been pacing for hours. I mean, there were feces on the wall. Paint a little bit of the picture for you. So this was Lauren, you know, in her early days of trying to experiment with connecting. He sat down next to me and we started talking. Now, he did not speak English, but there was a very powerful connection right there because I was reaching for him. I was reaching for connection. We got the connection, and I think it led to some empowerment. So, you know, I think I share that as a way of hoping to touch on this notion of, you know, that some people seem to be too far away and not reachable, and I don't think that they are. I think that we use our creativity and our intelligence, and we find some shared something, even with people who literally speak a different language. And that's been my experience with other people in other countries in my travels, that if we take the time to give our full attention and speak, you know, and listen from our heart, we can reach anyone. It might take longer than we want, but we can do it.
Yeah, we are getting so many amazing questions. We've had over 400 people on the call, so please, I apologize if we don't get to your question. We are keeping track of the questions, and we'll do our best to respond as we can. We have a question now. Can only a person who is in mental health recovery or a survivor provide authentic CPR?
I would say absolutely not. This program really was developed for any human being. We worked very hard to do that. And just like CPR, which we modeled it on, the cardiopulmonary resuscitation, this is for any person in the world.
Yeah, I would agree. But I would say probably the training and teaching of it is most easily adapted by people with lived experience of recovery, because it resonates so deeply, we find, with people, you know, who've been through these experiences, that you don't have to do quite as much teaching.
Well, I think because some of us have been there, we've been to these dark, deep places, that we aren't as afraid of them as perhaps people who haven't been there.
Right.
So we can hold out hope and perhaps connect, because we may not be as afraid.
Okay, so we have another question here. What about when speech or behavior is disorganized and communication is unclear? What is your advice for connecting?
Ann or Sam?
I'll take it. I think I'd want to start trying to connect on the basis of the feelings, and that's using those dialogue-style communication skills again. A lot of times you can sort of guess at what the person is feeling based on their body language or the way they're expressing themselves. And it's okay to guess, because if you're not right, they'll tell you, and then they start to sort of look around and say, what am I feeling? Even if the thought content's not clear, the feelings are usually pretty loud and clear.
And I would say you know, you can help a lot without understanding everything. And I think the important thing I would add to what Ann said is, which is sort of implied in what she said, is you're really trying to connect without judgment. So if you're thinking they're disorganized, they're you know, they're not in reality, and you've got all this you know, judgment about what is going on, it really cuts down on your openness to possibilities to understand what their experience is and connect with them based on what they're feeling. So that not labeling and not judging, I think, really helps just to find those opportunities to connect with somebody on the basis of their feelings.
Any other thoughts on communicating with somebody who is not conventionally easy to understand or communicate with?
You know, someone earlier today, I'm not even sure who it was, it might have been you, Dan, asked, are you there? And I think sometimes that is the question that people are wondering. It's, are you there? Is anyone there? And I think that part of eCPR is we want them to know that we are there, that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was mute for 1 month at one point, and at the beginning of a hospitalization, I just didn't feel safe at all to talk, and medication didn't do a thing. But what really helped was there was a Navy hospital, and a corpsman just developed a nonverbal language with me, and I think actually even sign language might be helpful at times like that, because it's your emotional side that you most want to communicate from and to another person. Because our world seems so, if people are just talking and they aren't connecting emotionally, there's no reason really to be part of it.
Okay, well, here's another question about the sort of empowering / revitalizing phase. What are some of the questions that you ask people to help them access their own ideas or plan?
I think one of the things is kind of exploring past experiences where they felt empowered in their own life, and sort of exploring how that might translate into their present experience. So drawing on that memory is one way. Was there a time when you dealt with something like this, or a real difficulty, and what happened? And then when you see how they respond, it gives you more information to kind of keep going.
I try to go for their passion. What do they feel passionate about, especially when they've been in and are in a great deal of emotional distress. And it might be also a very concrete thing often. I remember what helped me one time was, what do you most want to eat? And it was ice cream. I really wanted ice cream. That was very important to me at that time. Or just you want to go see somebody. You want to get out. There's something very immediate, though, is often very important, but it has some meaning to you. So you can say there's a reason. There's a reason to get up and do something.
Any of the other speakers want to address this question? Okay, we are going to try to take a few live questions here. I do want to ask you all in the audience, if you put your hand up and you no longer want to ask a question verbally, please, remove your hand, put your hand down, please. So I'm just going down the list in alphabetical order here. I see a question from Denise Fletcher. Denise, if you would like to ask a question now, I have unmuted your line. Denise, are you there?
Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yep.
Okay. I was just wondering, recently my neighbor was Baker acted. I'm in Florida, and I didn't know really what to tell her. She was very angry about someone calling on her. It was an emergency situation, and then we helped her and we picked her up at the hospital. So I don't know what the best thing to say to someone who's angry about that situation.
What was the situation again? I didn't hear that part.
Someone called 911 on her, and she was upset because she was taken from her home to emergency. So I did the best I could to just tell her to try to take care of herself so people didn't worry, because we were all worried about her and someone had called on her. And so I just tried to help make her feel safe and loved. So.
That sounds very good. Sounds like you did the right thing. Just be there for her and allow her to express some of that anger.
Okay.
Okay. too near an airport.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Denise. Did anybody else have a response to Denise's question?
I would just say that I think one of the reasons eCPR exists is so that people have less of those experiences, that someone might try to, might offer help and might, you know, help that person determine on their own, give them the power and choice to determine how to get through that crisis without feeling disempowered and humiliated. So that's, I mean, that doesn't exactly answer what to do right then. I think Dan addressed that, but I think that's one of the things, the reasons, so that people don't have to go through that so much.
All right. I see another hand, Karen Taylor. Karen, if you are still on the line with us, I've unmuted you, so feel free to go ahead and ask your question. You there, Karen? All right.
Next one.
Sorry, we're going to
Mute her.
head on to the next person, Karen. If you want to ask a question, you can send us a chat here. All right, I see a question now from a hand raised from Carrie Brown. Carrie Brown, I just unmuted you. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, you can hear me?
Sure can. Yes, yeah. Please go ahead.
All right. What we found is, I mean, this might be really simplistic, but in Recovery International, it's you know, along with being truthful with yourself and everything, it's to you know, normally when police come to a house with a disturbance, you know, they are going to arrest the person that is agitated, whether that person is the one in the wrong or not. It's the agitation. So that's, you know, the simplistic thing is, whenever, I mean, regardless if somebody calls on you or something, if somebody comes to your place and you are really super calm and talking to them straight, looking them in the eye, they cannot, will not take you away. It's that simple.
Thank you. It was more a comment than a question. I would agree with it.
Thank you for bringing it up, though.
Yeah.
You know, we have been working with law enforcement, and in fact, the International Association of the Chief of Police recommends in a policy report that they published, I think in 2010, they recommend emotional CPR training for all law enforcement personnel. And we have a number of police officers that really do get it. They really do get that when they're called out, you know, on a 911 call, you know, the adrenaline's flowing, everybody's, you know, kind of uptight, that it's not about the badge, it's not about their weapon, it's about being real and connecting with that person. So we have a long way to go, and I welcome folks to you know, contact us if you would like to work with your local law enforcement department around
That's what we need to do here too.
CPR with them. We need it all over the country, let me tell you. Thanks for bringing up that point.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, now we're going to take a few more questions that were submitted. There have actually been a few questions about how do you do eCPR with somebody who is in sort of the most intense stages of grief. Someone gave an example. You are friends with somebody who's had a spouse who's died recently. They seem to be shutting themselves down. What would an example be of emotional CPR that can help and encourage a person go forward in a bereavement situation?
Sam or Ann, do you want to take a stab at that?
I'll talk to that one. Let me unmute myself. Yeah, you unmuted me. Thank you. I think that's a great question. We tend to want people to get over their grief really quickly and get back into life. And in fact, we label them if they have a major loss and their grief goes on for more than 60 days. I think trying to stay connected to a person, which means not saying, let me know if I can do anything, but saying, I'm going to come over on Saturday and clean your house, or I'm going to bring you dinner tomorrow night, or we're going to go to the movies on Sunday, something like that as a way to help people stay connected to life while they grieve as they need to. People need to grieve for a long time sometimes, and I when I lost my mother, grieved for much longer than 60 days, and fortunately was allowed to. But I did have good friends at the time who did come over and check on me or take me out places, and they let me cry and they let me be sad, but they didn't let me get away. As Lauren says, reaching for somebody. I had people reaching for me all the time, and they let me be me, but they didn't let go of me.
Do any of the other speakers want to respond to using eCPR with people in grief?
Well, I just, well, you want to go ahead, Sam?
Well, I would just say that to some extent we can't predict what we would do. I mean, it's that being with a person, and it's really, really unique to where they are right then in that situation. So it's sort of, eCPR is sort of the opposite of a checklist of what you would do. Although being there and being available and offering is kind of the essence.
Yeah, I would echo that. I lost my mother died about 3 months ago, and when people are authentic, I mean, it gets back to being authentic. If somebody says, you know, how are you, and I feel they're asking in a way that they really seem to want to know, then, you know, I feel more comfortable with sharing. If they share some loss they had, not so long after my mother died, I was talking to a woman whose mother had died several months before, and we just shared what it was like, the shock and the grief, and because it is hard. It's hard to realize what it's going to be like, but until it happens to you. I think in terms of sharing one's feelings, though, it is important to realize don't overwhelm the person with your own feelings. And it's, you know, we've had these restrictions previously on showing any feelings, but it can go the other way. You don't want to worry the person that you show so many feelings that they think they have to suddenly, you know, take care of you too much. So be aware of the impact of what you're sharing on the person that you're sharing it with.
I think everyone's really shared beautiful stuff here, and I guess the only thing I would add is that I think the greatest gift we can give to another person is really ourselves and our best loving attention. And I think that's what we've been talking about.
All right, well, we have just a little over 5 minutes left, and we'll try to pack a few more questions in here. Let's see if we can maybe get to one more hand. Let's see. Okay, I see one from Pamela Caligari. Pamela, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm going to unmute if you'd like to ask your question, Pamela. Are you there?
Pamela?
We don't seem to hear her. Okay, well, maybe we'll go to a question here about the application of eCPR by peers within public health settings. How can eCPR be used by peers working in public health settings?
Very easily.
Yeah, I don't know that it's different from other settings. Go ahead. Was that Sam or Ann?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's the real beauty and draw of eCPR. As I think Lauren talked about at the beginning, it's a community based thing. It's really based on like the video where you see your neighbor and he or she is really upset, and you provide help. So there's no, it's not setting specific. It's something. It really draws on our ability as human beings to just reach out and help each other. And it really challenges that idea that, you know, certain people in certain times and places are the only ones that can help someone who's in crisis. It doesn't mean that there aren't expert and there aren't specific settings, but it is saying that with just some basic training, and that's what eCPR is, it really reconnects people with their belief and their own ability that we can help each other. So it certainly would work in a public health setting, but it would work anywhere. That's why I think it's so wonderful.
And thank you, Sam. We have time for just about one more question, but this is a very important question, and we don't want to overlook it. Several people have talked about what is the application of eCPR to suicide prevention. And in a related way, what if you are doing eCPR with somebody who is actively expressing feelings or thoughts of suicide or seems serious about suicide? And how do we use eCPR in that situation?
First of all, I think that when someone's in emotional distress, there is a diminishment, as I was mentioning, of their connection to their own life force and of feeling that life is really worthwhile. But in emotional CPR, just as in physical CPR, you're helping somebody's physical heart, in helping someone's emotional heart to beat again, you're helping their sense of life and their sense of connection to their own life. And in many instances, I found that if somebody is not sure about their future, not sure about their life, just knowing that they're connected to another person and being connected at an emotional level can, literally, the revitalization is a sense of feeling that life is worth living again, because that's what you really basically want to be able to help someone feel that they have a future and that they have a life. And I try to just stay in touch with my own sort of vitality and see if I can reach somebody. If I'm not able to reach them, I would call for additional help. Maybe there's somebody else in their family, some friend, someone who can reach them. But don't try just to do it alone if you're really worried and there are a lot of signals going up that you can't reach the person. It really is about connecting at that heart level, though. I think that brings people back.
And
okay, so we have just about a minute left. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say what we tell folks in our peer-run programs here, which is that unless the person has already taken an overdose or they're holding a weapon, you have all the time in the world. You can always choose to bring in somebody later, whether or not you feel better about the person, but you have all the time in the world.
And I think I would just like to say that I've had the experience of someone telling me that my reaching out to them stopped them from and they were planning that action. And I think my own experience is it is only relationships and people reaching out to me that ever cut through my feelings of despair when I was suicidal. It was people reaching out that brought me back.
Well, that is a very, very powerful note on which to end. And we're so sorry for those of you whom we couldn't get to your questions. Again, we are keeping track of your questions and comments. Please visit our website, emotional-cpr.org. We have a frequently asked questions page that might answer some of your questions as well. Don't hesitate to contact us. And we're very, very thankful to all of you for your interest, your passion, and we hope we'll be doing continuing education of this sort on the internet and online. So thank you so much again, and thanks to all of our speakers for their wonderful presentation. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.